Hey guys, welcome. Today we'll be presenting a topic on Salesforce Composite Connector. And before starting that, let me introduce myself. My name is Nitish Raj, and I'm currently associated with PwC India from past 1.5 years. My total years of experience is 6.5 now, and I have worked on Mule 3.8, 3.9, and currently working on Mule 4 assignments. And I have total around 4+ experience in MuleSoft. So let's start quickly about Salesforce Composite Connector. Before starting about the introduction of Salesforce Composite Connector, let me give you one use case. So this use case is how do you create a parent account and a child contact, right? So this account will be a parent and contact will be a child, which will be related to this parent account. So let's see about the traditional approach where we are not using Salesforce Composite Connector, but we'll be using a traditional approach and how it would be. So first of all, we have to prepare the payload for account creation. That's right. Next is we'll create that account and we'll get the account response as well. So for that, we'll be using one create connector here, Salesforce connector here. And this connector is based on the operations in Mule 4, right? So here it will be counted as the first API call because from your client, so client is MuleSoft and One Studio, say, all right, or your API, and from here it will call your Salesforce instance, and Salesforce instance will be your server, right? So it will create an account, will give you the response. The next would be you have to pass that particular account response to get the ID, the record ID from this newly created account, to have that on to contact while creating that contact, right? So you pass that particular account response, prepare the payload for contact, and next step would be using one connector, create connector, where you'll be creating the contact, right? So this will count as a second API call. So what happens here is you are actually, going through 3 or 4 steps, right? So you are having one preparing the payload for account, then creating one account using connector, then getting the response, and then again creating the contact with that particular response as an ID. So essentially, we are having more than 3 or 4 steps, and we are exhausting 2 API calls from Salesforce instance. So to overcome this, Salesforce actually introduced composite resources in Spring 2017 release, Spring 17 release. To overcome all these difficulties where you do not have to go one by one sequentially, right, to create parent-child relationships, to create subsequent request where you have some dependencies and just like that. So Salesforce came up with this composite resources API and Spring 17 release. And what exactly is a composite, if you ask, right? So this composite is taken by Google, by the way. So as adjective says made up of several parts or elements. So when we say, take an example, a layman example, when we say Earth is composed of many parts, what does compose here means? So it means that it's made up of several parts, multiple parts, right? So where we say composite, it's essentially means that is made up of several parts or elements. So we have multiple composite resources inside Salesforce. And what are those? We'll see about it one by one. So before that, what is a composite connector in MuleSoft for Salesforce is MuleSoft actually out of the box connector. It has out of the box connector which is used to access Salesforce composite resource in a single API call. Please pay attention here that it says composite resources in a single API call, right? And this actually holds true for each and every, not each and every, but most of the composite resources that we'll be going to see. But we have one exception, we'll talk about it. And since It does all the execution in a single API call itself. So what it does essentially, it minimizes the number of round trips between client and server. The client is MuleSoft and server is Salesforce instance, right? Because what you do is, in traditional approach, what we do is like we create an account, we get the response, and we again go to Salesforce instance, we again call server to create a contact, right? But here what we'll do is we'll make only one call with all the sub requests and requests in our payload itself, and we'll leave the rest to the Salesforce. So Salesforce internally will call contact, will call other objects or whatsoever to create the relationship, to create the other payloads. So, how many composite resources we do have in Salesforce currently? Let's see about it. So, composite resources, we have composite request. Next is we have composite graphs. We have batch as object tree and as object collections. So, essentially, Salesforce currently provides all these composite resources, but we'll be talking about composite request, batch, and as object tree. If you want to know more about composite graphs and subject collections, then let me know. I'll create another video. Let's go ahead. So currently in Mail 4, we have Salesforce connectors based on each and every operation. So likewise, we do have same in Salesforce composite connector as well, which are based out of operations. So from create a subject collection, a subject tree to till absurd a subject collections, all that, we have more than 20 connectors and 20 operations you can say in Salesforce Composite. Let's talk about the first one, which is composite request. Right, we'll go one by one. So what essentially is composite request means. So first thing it says executes a series of REST API requests in a single call. Single call as in you provide desired amount of sub requests inside it, and it will have a single API call itself. And when I say desired amount of sub request, it again has some limit. We'll talk about it. And the response of one of the requests can be used as an input to a next request. So composite request means, so suppose you have one request and that particular response of that first request can be used as the input to the next request. Like take an example again, simple example of account and contact. You create an account first, you get the ID, then you can use that ID to create another contact, right? And the third point says the response bodies and HTTP statuses of the request are returned in a single response body. That means we send the API request in a single request itself, and we get the response in a single body, in a single response itself. So you send one request and you get one response. And that particular request and response, you have all the requests, all the sub requests, right? And says the entire series of requests count as a single call towards your API limits. That's where we have to pay more attention because if we would have used traditional approach, then it would have counted say two API accounts. But since we are using this composite request, it will act as a single API, single request itself. And this is again a very important point where it says you can have up to 25 sub requests in a single call. You cannot have more than 25 sub requests. So suppose you can create only up to 25 records in Salesforce using this composite request. If we go with a 26 request, what it does is it will fail on that particular movement and will throw an error saying, hey, you cannot create more than 25 sub requests here. Or with an error type saying operation too large, or something like that. Right? And this particular, if you're using MuleSoft Salesforce Composite Connector, right? What it expects is in the payload section, it will expect you to send an object and not an array. Because inside that particular instance of object, you can send multiple arrays in your composite request if you see here. So it's if you see the left side, it has one object object has all or none, collect sub request, and composite request. We'll talk about this all or none or collect sub request. Let's talk about this composite request. This composite request is essentially your body where it is expecting an array, and that particular array can have multiple objects inside it as a part of your sub request. So if you see at the right hand side, what it has done is in the composite request, the first object here has one method as post URL. It is sending to this particular URL, which is account object, and it's creating a name, creating a field with field name as name and its value as composite request account. Why it's creating? Because we have used method as post. So one more thing to pay attention is it has your method. So method, since we are talking about these are all REST APIs. So REST API as per the HTTP protocol and the REST principles, we can use HTTP verse as get, post, put, patch, head, etc. And this URL, you have to mention this URL as services and services slash data slash. It should be started. It should start with slash services slash data. Then your API version. So version 51.0 is the most recent one. Slash s object slash account. So this s object is Salesforce object, and account is what object you are having an execution on. And this reference ID is something it's very crucial to know, because this particular reference will be used whatever you give as a reference ID here. So this can be a string, right? So this ref account is not a hard-coded value. I mean, not a static value. It could be changed to any other string. You can have, say, account response, reference account, account output, or something like that. And then in the next one, what you can do is, if you see here, in the second part, what is just getting the getting the from getting one thing from contact object. So it has services slash data slash your API version, which is same across both, and it's querying actually. So it has used one endpoint as query, and query is select ID from contact where last name is BARR. So you can write the query from anywhere. I mean, you can get the response from any object, not from this contact, but from any other custom object or Salesforce standard objects, right? And then last one, where we have see, where we have third sub request, which is patch. What it does is, if you see in body here, so I'll just skip on the URL and reference ID because I already explained it here. So in the body, if you see, account ID is or at the rate ref account dot ID. What is this? So this is syntax to use or to refer to the any reference whichever you have already made. If you see, this ref account is already made, already referenced, already as in you can say initialized on the first sub request, and this particular third sub request is using ref account. This particular response dot ID to do what? To update this particular to particular this on this URL on this particular request or record, right? Let's go ahead. Next one is its error handling properties. When we say this particular composite request has an error handler inside built in it, because it uses REST APIs and we have multiple requests in it, so we should have something like rollback strategy, right? Because if all 25 requests fails, if one of it fails, then what to do? So that's why they have given one attribute or field as all or none, which is a boolean type of field. You can say true or false, right? And in case of failure, what happens is, so suppose you have all or none as true, which is by default. If you do not even mention this particular all or none key attribute, it takes the composite request acts as a true by default. So what happens is, suppose you have 25 requests, sub requests, and 25th got failed. What happens? What should happen? So the entire composite request is rolled back, right? And no matter what, even if it is an error or a successful scenario, your top level request returns HTTP 200. Even if a top level request as in the first one, this complete response is see before this top level you will have something. It will return HTTP 200 and it will have the inclusion of all the responses for each sub request, which could fail, which not. Ideally, if it is true, then say 1 to 24 all got passed, and 25th got failed, and 25th will have why it got failed. And if we select to choose all are none as false, so what happens is the remaining sub requests that do not depend on the failed sub request are executed. Suppose you have the first one account creation, then you have contact creation. So contact creation on the second point, right? It is actually dependent on the first account creation. What if first failed, right? And you have the all or none as false. Second, since it will be using the reference of that first particular sub request, it should not execute. It will skip that, right? It will skip and it will have an error as well why it got failed, right? And it says dependent sub requests aren't executed. Like same I just explained. If it has contact has a reference of any other sub request, say as a contact account, it will not execute. Right? So I have put a note here which says in either of cases, the top level request returns HTTP 200 and includes response for each sub request. So this will be the response that we'll see. It is just a syntax where we have object inside that we have nested objects inside an array which will have composite sub request results. We'll see when we are going to have a demo. All right, so the question says what is the default error attribute value all or none for a composite request. If you do not mention anything for this all or none particular attribute, what will be the value for it? As we saw, it will have a true by default, right? If you want to make it false, you have to mention it explicitly. If you do not mention it explicitly, then all or none will be true, and you do not have to, write it down in your request. So the answer is all or none will have true by default. Next one is batch. So it's very interesting. This batch one is very interesting. And I think each and every composite resource API that we'll be talking about is interesting. So let's talk about this batch one. So the batch first one says executes up to 25 sub requests in a single request. Why? Because it has some limitation from Salesforce. If you try to have 26 sub requests and it gets executed, it will throw an error saying operation too large. You cannot send more than 25 sub requests, right? And the response bodies and HTTP status of sub requests in the batch are returned as single response body. It is same as composite request. And each sub request count against rate limits. You might ask me, hey, earlier you said each and every composite API will count as a single API itself against the Salesforce API limits. But why this? Why this batch? I'll tell you. I'll tell you why. Because in batch, each and every sub request executes independently. Independently, as in they will not have any dependency on each other. So sub request one can execute independently. Sub request two should not have and cannot have dependency on sub request 1 and so on till sub request 25, right? It says all sub requests are executed in the context of same user and sub requests are independent like I just explained, and sub requests execute serially in their order in the request body. So because see, each and every composite resource is sequential and synchronous in nature. You have to be very careful about that. Even if you're using batch as subject tree, as collection, as subject collections, as composite graphs or composite requests, Each and every API resource API will be synchronous in nature. Why? Because it's a REST API, and they have made this like synchronous. So if we have to, so suppose if you have to query 25 objects, different objects, it might be same, it might be different, like account, contact, opportunity, promotion item, price book entry, quotation, case, anything, right? So what you can do is like you can have all those in a single request, divided into multiple sub requests on query all the objects at once. It will not help you to minimize the rate, minimize the what do you say API limits, but what it can do is you can have more flexibility at yourself, at your end, right? So MuleSoft Salesforce Composite Connector expects payload to be an array. And one more thing, this with when we say each sub request count against rate limits, right? Rate limits and API limits both are different, right? So API limit is something that your in Salesforce instance has a license where they say it's only API user, or particular any user, admin user say they cannot uh, hit my Salesforce instance more than 50,000 times a day, right? And the rate limit does is rate limits is basically, suppose you cannot hit one particular instance more than say 10 times in a second, more than 10 times a minute or a day or whatsoever. So those are rate limits. Where were we? So okay. So MuleSoft Salesforce Composite Connector expects payload to be an array. If you see this, which is an array, because it expects an array. In Salesforce Composite request we saw it was expecting an object, right? So it expects an array. And for error handling part, it has one field which says halt and error. So if you do not define it explicitly in your request body, the default will be false. We'll see about it. Default will be false, and it would not halt the execution even if it fails at say fifth sub request and sub request, 15th sub request, or 25th sub request. It will just go on. At the end, it will give you the response saying, "Hey, all these sub requests got successful, all these sub requests got failed," something like that. If you say halt and error is true, right? So what happens is if fifth sub request got failed, it will halt. It will stop on that particular sub request, and it will not go on the sixth sub request or subsequent sub request. Why? Because your batch composite resource executes sequentially and in synchronous fashion. So it will not go to the next request, next, and it will fail there itself. Let's see the request and response. So request is something like you have one method which is this patch at say this particular account record ID, where I'm saying I have said name as old name, but I'm just putting it as a name as new name. I'm just updating that particular account. And next, I'm just getting from account for this particular record itself, and I'm trying to get fields as name and billing postal code, right? So these are totally independent sub request. Instead of account here, I can get the contact as well, and I can put one record which is already there in Salesforce, and I can say get me the fields from this particular contact, right? And response will you will receive has errors as false because there were two requests, and out of this nothing got failed. You will get that particular response as has as false, and results as status 204, which is of patch, status code 200, which is of get, and you get the data here, right? So this particular has name and billing postal code. So name will get the new name because we just updated it. And even if we are updating this and we are getting this, it doesn't mean that these are dependents, right? It could be anything. This could be anything. This particular could be anything. This could be like updating an account, getting a account or contact and from any other object. Probably just creating one new account or something like that. All right, question time again. Question is a composite batch request synchronous in nature? If yes, then why? Yes, certainly it's synchronous in nature because it follows REST principles, and in Salesforce instance, when you use a batch composite resource, it will be synchronous and sequential in nature. Sequential as in, if you have 25 sub requests, each and every sub request will be executed one after another. That is sequential. And when we say one after another, that doesn't mean those are dependent on each other. They are not. They're independent, and output from one cannot be used in another sub request, right? Logically saying, but you can made it to work, right? Because like you can have it's independent, you cannot have reference of it, right? But whatever you just created or updated, you can get in the second sub request, right? You can do that. That doesn't make mean that it has some dependency on it. Going further, we have next is as object tree, and after we complete all this, we'll have demo as well. So yeah. So we have this as object tree, which is it names us what is a tree. As object is Salesforce object. What is a tree? Tree, right? We might have studied in our school, college, or we might have worked on trees and these algorithms like that, right? So tree is something like which will have your parent node, your child nodes, right? Your root node and your child nodes. So tree is something like think of it as a in Salesforce, think of a parent account. So account is a parent, account is a root, and it has multiple, nodes. So it has multiple children, which is say contact, right? An account can have multiple contacts, and further, a contact can have multiple opportunities. Excuse me. So like that, so it says creates one or more as object trees with record of the specified type. Specified type as in when whenever you are using a subject tree, create a subject tree or update anything in MuleSoft, you have to specify what is the root type, root object type. Without you cannot go. In batch and composite requests, we would not have in a root type, but in a subject tree, you need to specify one root type. We'll see about it. And says an a subject tree is a collection of nested parent-child records with a single root record. Right? This is same. And what it expects is a payload on the MuleSoft connector. It expects an array like batch and unlike composite request. And this is very crucial. So please pay attention here. It says the request can contain the following what up to a total of 200 records across all trees. In batch in composite request you can only create 25 sub requests, 25 records. But in S object tree we can create up to 200 records across all trees. What does it mean? Okay, it is dependent on the next one. Let's see. It says up to five records of different types. And as subject trees up to five level deeps. What does that mean? As subject trees up to five level deep and up to five records of different types. We'll see about it. Let's go here. Okay. So suppose it says up to five levels deep, right? And you have to mention, we have to specify one record type. I mean, main root record. So say my root record, root object, not record, sorry, is account, right? So this is my account. This will be my parent. Okay, let me just go and make it big for you. Okay. So root object account is a parent. So this is my say this is my first. Okay, this is my first level, which is my root level, right? Inside that, I can create one contact, which is a child, which is a say second level here, right? And I go and create a third level inside that contact, which says uh, opportunity, opportunity. Okay, and this is my third level. And that inside that opportunity, I can have another fourth level, which is say my opportunity line items, right? Which is will be my fourth level. And inside that particular opportunity line item, I can have another fifth level. I started from account as a root object and I can go up to five levels. So fifth level would be my inside under this opportunity line item. So opportunity line item can have multiple quotations or quote, whatever you say, right? So I'll just say quotation. So this is my fifth level. So this is my fifth level. I cannot go deep down from here. I cannot go till six and create quotations line item, right? I cannot go. So this particular not allowed, right? So this will not be allowed. You can go only till quotations. Another thing is another thing to have very uh, knowledge about here is suppose I say in my one sub I mean in one nested record parental hierarchy I went till five, right? Can I what if I need to go to this sixth one quotation line item, but I need to like I can start from opportunity, right? So the answer is and connector itself you cannot start with the opportunity because you have defined a root level as a account here. So what you can do is suppose and you can ask me one more question. So query here is what if instead of opportunity I want to have a case. Case is again my it would be my third level only, right? It would be my third level, but on contact. So like a contact can have multiple cases, right? A contact can have multiple cases and contact can have multiple opportunities. So in that case, what you can do is you start from the root object itself, you go to the contact, and then instead of opportunity, you can have your case here. You can have a case. Okay, let me just put it here. And I do not want for fourth or fifth level of uh, my objects. So I'll just say case here, right? But each and every request has to, even the nested object request has to start with your root object. So count, contact, case, right? And you can have the account, contact, opportunity, all like this. All this. So I hope it's clear. Let's go to the next part. Request is something like this, where we have this so this will be my like, object, but I'll working with Animal Studio. I'll start with the records, which will be my array. So it starts with attributes. And attributes has this type as account because you have to start with the root level account and the reference ID you have to make because it will use the references and it might use references, but inside that particular uh, sub request itself, you can have your child nodes, child request as well. Here in context, if you say, I mean, in this particular say attributes, you have defined account will be my parent, and I'll have this all these fields as name, phone, website, number, employees, industry. Inside that particular account, I should have two records of contacts where you have mentioned all this. And this is again a next sample account too. This is again a different account, different record, which again should start with account root level. If you see, it cannot start with the contact. If you want to go beyond this, go in deeper levels, you can contacts can have another nested array with the sub request of its children records. I hope this is clear. A response would be something like this. It will have has error as false. I mean true or false, whatever is there as per the response if you are getting as error or all the successful, and results will be some request based on the reference ID on the what reference what ID is there, and if it got failed, it will have your messages as well, right? If it got failed, it will not have the ID, but it will have the messages. Let's go ahead. Question 10. So it says, how many sub requests and a subject tree can I have? We saw about Salesforce Composite request, we saw about Salesforce Composite batch. Now we're talking about a subject tree, right? So batch can create 25 requests, one request with 25 sub requests. Composite can have one request with 25 sub requests. What about a subject tree? So a subject tree can have 200 records, 200 sub requests across all the levels. And levels, what? How many levels we can have? We can only have at max 5 levels, right? So next is demo time. Okay, so let's go and start with the demo. Right. So before showing about the how it will work in Anyone Studio and in real life, let's talk about this MuleSoft composite connector. How do we set up it? Right. So to set up it, first of all, it will not be available in your palette, Anyone Studio palettes. You have to go to Endpoint Exchange, and you have to search for it. Search for this only for MuleSoft Salesforce Composite Connector. You'll find it. Add it in your modules. Add it in your modules. It will become visible in a palette, right? And so post that, after this step, you'll have to set up that particular connector. To set up that, MuleSoft actually provides. You can say MuleSoft or Salesforce provide multiple ways to configure it, right? So first is OAuth 2.0, next is OAuth username password or JWT, and OAuth SAML, right? So here we are using OAuth username and password, and for this OAuth username password, because each and every type of connection uses OAuth, so for that particularly you have to create one connected app in Salesforce. You might be wondering what is a connected app. So connected app is a framework which is provided by Salesforce to create to integrate with external applications, external systems in most idiomatic way through APIs, right? So they use SAML. It can be used multiple protocols as SAML, JWT, or 2.0, OpenID Connect, or something like that, right? So if you see here at attribute section, it requires consumer key, consumer secret, username, password, token, and token endpoint. So token endpoint we can give, right? It will be automatically populated for you. If not, then you can give this one. And security token is something whenever you have this particular ID username of yours, you'll get that particular security token as well. Username password we all know. And next, let's see about this consumer key and consumer secret. How to obtain that, right? So it says create connected app in Salesforce. How you can create? Go to setup, and once you have logged into your Salesforce instance, go to setup, build, create apps, or you can directly go to setup and just hit the apps. You'll get the apps in the left section, and from there you can go to the connected apps and create a new. We'll see how you can create one. Okay, so this is my Salesforce instance. I have already logged in, and this is where you will see the setup right here. I'll go to the setup. So once it is at setup page, it's at setup page. In quick find search, you can type apps and you can search for apps. You'll see apps under build create apps like we saw it here. Inside your build create apps, you'll see this apps. So just click on this apps. There will be a page open in front of you where, and if you scroll down at bottom, you'll see connected apps section. I have already created one connected app with the name MuleSoft. You can go and create a new as well. Let me go and create one new connected app. You just click on this new button and a new page will be opened up. You can go and name your connected app name. So suppose I'm saying Salesforce only. Okay, Salesforce Mule. API name will be generated automatically. Contact email I can give mine, or like you can give use admin, use anything. Right? And this is important. Enable OAuth setting, because without OAuth settings, even if we create on a connected app, we cannot integrate with Salesforce. So we have to enable OAuth settings. Just click on this checkbox button. You'll see something as it says callback URL is mandatory. You can give a callback URL as even if you local or some other URL if you have created. For now, I'll just say check on this button. It will give a callback URL, and here you have all the OAuth scopes which are available for this particular connected app, right? So this OAuth scopes is basically what kind of APIs you are going to use. Even it's a part or chatter API, chatter is something for use for discussions and everything on a case. But then you have for API, you can create custom permissions as well if you created already. But I'll just go and select full access and will add to the OAuth scope. And that's it, nothing to do. Just go and click on save. So once you click on save, it will give you a particular message saying allow us from 2 to 10 minutes. So it will take some time actually to create the consumer secret and consumer key here. So I'm just allowing it some time. Let's go and see what happens. So I have created. So you'll see something like this, right? It will have your version, your API name, created by, and all these details. And API enable OAuth settings, you'll see a consumer key and consumer secret. Okay, so you can copy this consumer key, which will be used in your Salesforce composite connector configuration and your consumer secret as well. Once you click on this click to reveal, it will reveal a consumer secret which you can copy and put it there in consumer secret attribute. Okay, so that's it. Let's go to your here back. We discussed about this one, how to create one connected app, how you can enable your OAuth settings, and how can you copy your consumer key and consumer secret. Right? Let's go to your Anyone Studio. All right. So in my Anyone Studio, I have already added this particular Salesforce Composite Connector module, so it will be shown here. Okay. So I have created these three flows. The first flow is composite request, tree, and your batch. So we'll go one by one. So let me start my postman. So all right, let's go one by one. So first one here, I'm just using HTTP listener to trigger my API. And the first composite request, I have used this execute composite request. If you go to Salesforce composite connector, you'll see execute composite batch, execute composite draft, and execute composite request. So I just drag and drop the execute composite request here, which because we'll be using and which we thought about it, right? So if you see in this particular request, what I have done is, so it expects, if you see, it expects you to send one object, and it has all the known as true composite request. It has one whole array. Inside that we have three sub requests. So first sub request is creating one account with the name composite request account with this method and this URL where it is going to create an account. Then second, it gets the contact from contact object with the name as last name as BAR. Okay, and I have this reference. I have given the reference as ref contact. Either here I have given reference as ref account. And third one, what I'm doing is whatever I got. Like I first created an account, then I got the reference that I got the contact with this particular last name, and whatever I got in second sub request, I have to update that. I have to update. I have to update this particular contact's account ID, right? So one contact will have account, right? I'll have to update that particular account contact with a new account ID, right? So let's do one thing. Let's go to Salesforce and see, do we have composite request account, or what is the account ID for this particular record? Okay. So let me go to the account section. Just click on tabs, go to the accounts, and go to the all accounts. It's taking too long, so let me just start the workbench till the time. Okay, so from all accounts, let's see if I have this particular composite request account. Right? Account name, if you see, I do not have a composite request account, and the total number of accounts in my instance is 12. Right? And let's go to this particular where last name is there. Let's check it. What is the ID here and what its name? Right. So I'm just log into my workbench so I can get that particular contact, and we can know on this particular contact what is the account currently related. I'll just remove this ones. Okay, let me do one thing. Best is select ID name from contact where this, and let us query. Okay, it says no records returned. Okay, so it did not return any record, right? So let me go and do one thing. So then I'm just you know having one probably last name as well. So what we'll do is like we'll just change the request. Okay, so let's change this one. Where's it? Saint Forbes, right? So I'll just go and change its last name to Barr. Okay, or probably it will not show it. I mean, it will show me this Forbes. I can change it to Barr. Let me check. It's Barr. Okay, yeah, save. All right, now it's saved. So let me go and say last name from contact where a last name is equal to VARR. It should give me this particular ID KLRY triple A. Not sorry, this one KLRX triple A. Okay, it gave me this one, right? Let's go here and check. So it should have the last name as BARR, and we have to focus on what its account, which account it's related to, right? So we see it's related to edge communications, right? Here, edge communication. But what we have done is we are updating this particular contact to use the account what we have recently created. So it should update this edge communication to the composite request account. Okay. So just let me go and run this particular. It showed error. Let me see. Okay, it doesn't have any error. Okay, let it get deployed, then we can check. So this particular name should be same. The account name should be changed from edge communication to the composite request or the composite account, whatever we have given there, right? Let me go to this particular page. So I think we are done with this, right? We created, and right, so let it get redeployed first. We can then know more about your subject trees, your batch as well, right? So so what I have done is, so I have this postman, right? So I'm currently running it on localhost 8081, and I have this endpoint as composite request. I'm just making a GET request. If I make a GET request, I should get the response. The response should be in a format that where it shows you all the sub request response, right? So the first sub request got passed with this particular response. What was the response? If it was successful, it will show you the ID as well, right? And same as second and third as well. So from this one, if it gets created, it will show you that with this ID it got created. This will show you a particular account. I mean, not account, your contact ID, and this will just update that particular contact to use a new contact. Let me go to the Salesforce and have this refreshed. It has only 12 records. It should now be 13, and this particular account contact should have a new account name. Okay, so it's taking time. Okay, I'm not using a Mac Windows, so it takes time on Windows. It should be up in next 5 seconds, I guess. All right, let's go and have this particular. Okay, so it's still not deployed. What we'll do is we will just go to the next particular flow where I can explain and show it one by one once it is up, right? So here, let's talk about the next one, which is my S object tree. Right? S object tree, as we saw, so this S object tree works on parent-child relationships. So, and you have to mention which is your parent, which will be a root record, root object. So from Mule palette, I have just drag and drop create as object tree. If you see in this attributes, you have to mention your as object root type, which is a root type account. But if you see, I did not mention anything in execute composite request. I just had this request body as payload. But in as object tree, I have both things. I have the as object tree as like what is it's expecting body and your root type as well, right? So each and every request, even in a nested request in your hierarchy, it should start from account, right? We'll see about it. I think it's deployed now. All right, it's deployed. Let me go and send this particular request here. So once you send the request, it should go to the Salesforce instance. It will create, right? You'll see it has a status as 200, okay, and your composite response as an object which has because in a composite request you had your object, and inside that object you have multiple object inside a nested array in an array, right? So for the first request, it got created right till here, till this part. It got created with this ID, right? Success is true. I did not throw an error. Location is this one. So like you can just go and use Workbench or probably your um, your browser. Just your URL bar to have this particular record ID and the record. And HTTP status is 201 because post gives me post HTTP status request HTTP verb, sorry, give me 201. And the next one is my where I was getting the contact, right? If you see, so it total size is one because I had only because it only respond with only one contact where the last name was BAR, right? And this is my record ID. And the third one, it says 204 because the body's status code is 204 because it updated that particular con- contact. Now let's go and Salesforce and see. So I'm at 12 accounts here. Let me refresh my Salesforce instance. It should show you 13 now. If you see, composite request account got created. And let me go to this particular contact. It had the account name at Edge Communications. If I refresh this particular record, it should give me the account name as Salesforce composite request account, which I just got created in Salesforce. Right? Let me go and refresh this. If you see, this account name has been changed from Edge Communication to the newly created account to composite request account. Right? So what you did is like you created first you created, then you get some another contact record, then you updated that particular record. So essentially, what we can say that if we had taken a traditional approach, it would have taken three APIs, right? Three connectors, three APIs, and but now since we are using composite request, each and everything is done using one single request, single API itself, right? So that is beauty of this particular composite request and composite resources. So let's go ahead and talk about a subject-tree. We already understood why we are using a subject root type as here. Let me go to the set payload and show you how this payload is formed. If you see, yeah, and we discussed like this batch will expect to have the payload as an array, right? So even if I'm passing one object, I need to pass and I need to only send this one, only send the array. So in array, what I'm doing is in attributes, I'm sending one object, sending one record as name as object tree account. Inside that, I'm creating two contacts, one object on one record with name as object tree account contact one and as object tree account contact two as second contact in this particular as object tree account record itself, right? It has parent and child relationship. This is my parent, and if you pay attention, this is getting started from account, which is my record, root record, right? And it has to create one and contact two inside that. So let's go and select this as well. And in this particular transform message, I have just used a map function because it expects one array, right? So let me go and show you. So from currently we have only 13 records here, but now it should have one more with the name as subject tree account, which should have two child contacts, contact one and contact two, right? So let me go and this is my as object tree. I'll just go, it's already deployed, so I'm just going and sending one request to it. I should get the response within a couple of seconds here. Couple of seconds, yeah. So if you see, it has given me this response with has errors as false and results as three sub requests, three sub responses. Sub response is should be from your what do you say your account creation. Second is from content creation under that, and third is again content creation under the particular main object that is your account. Let's go to Salesforce and check if we have 14th account. Alright, so if you see we have 14th account as well with the name composite request account, no, as subject tree account, yes. So let's click on this as subject tree account. It should have two contacts under it, one with something something contact one and something something contact two. Let's see about it. So if you just scroll down under this contacts, you'll see as subject tree account one, contact one, as subject tree account contact two. You'll see two contacts are created. So essentially, it has parent-child relationship. That's why it created one account first, and under that, it created two contacts. Similarly, we explained about here, right? So we can go up to 5 level deep. We could have created opportunities, opportunity line item, quotations, right? So we only created account and contact. We could have created opportunity. Under that particular opportunity, we could have created opportunity line items, and opportunity line items we could have created quotations. So let's go to the third one, which is my as Salesforce composite request batch. So batch is like it has independent request, independent sub request in a single request itself, right? And it happens sequentially. It executes sequentially. So let me show you the request. So I have uh, placed very simplified requests here. So my first sub request is just getting the contact where last name is BARR, right? We changed that in Salesforce, so we should get it. And another is getting this limits from my Salesforce instance, right? So these are very unrelated to each other. They're no dependency. We can create one, account here. We can create another contact here, and that might not have any relationship. Then we can query from another account, another object, or something like that. So these are very unrelated sub request. And again, this batch expects you to send what your array. So since I have set the payload as object, but I have to send it as an array. So same as we saw in composite request, we do not have root type like we saw in as object tree, right? So sub request it only takes payload, so it expects payload as an array. That's it. If you see it in right hand side as well. So it has expected as array and actually is again an array, right? And so let me go and create this. So because I'm not creating anything, I'm just getting from this particular contact and getting the IP elements. So I should not be creating anything in Salesforce here, right? Not nothing here in contact, nothing in contact. So let's go to composite batch and send me the request. So once I send the request, it should not take much time. Okay, but you might say it's taking already 4.72 seconds, right? Because at the first time, what happens is like whenever doing this takes much more time to create the connections, and then again it uses the connection pools as per your configuration in the connector itself. So nothing to worry about it. So if you see, it has one response as in the form of object, and the results have your objects inside in a particular array. So if you see status code it gave for the first sub request at 200, total size is 1 because we had only one contact with the last name as BARR and its ID is this, right? That is true because we only using the get. If we would have used post, we could have got 201 and it's desire a required result there. If we would have used patch, we could have gotten 204 like that. And same goes for the second sub request, which is again a get request. So it responds with status code as 200 and the result as all this. So from Salesforce instance, it gave me all the limits from each and every instances, be it for your API integrations, be it for your bulk data loadables, your bulk APIs and everything, right? So instead of that, you could have used query to another object, maybe a standard object, Salesforce object, to get some ID or names or any other object, right? So this completes our demo, right? If you have any questions, I think you can write me on LinkedIn. You can reach to me on LinkedIn or probably my email ID. Let's complete this last uh, slide here. So this is very great slide. Uh, I'm just saying great because I actually took much time to research about it and put it into a single comparison table. You will not find it on internet. You'll find it on internet on very scattered fashion, but I just put it all together for you. So if you see comparison table, we have batch tree and composite requests. And the point number one, it says executes a set of sub requests in a single request, but each sub request count as a single API limit. So I'm sorry, this is not API limit, this is rate limit, right? As we explained this is not API limit, this is your rate limit. And even for the tree and composite request, whatever, how many sub request you have in a single request, it will count as a single API call itself. And for batch, it says sub requests are executed independently, and information cannot be passed between sub request calls. Right? We saw it. And three, sub requests are executed dependently on the root record because it's a parent-child relationship, nested relationship. And for a composite request, the output of one sub request can be used as the input to a subsequent sub request. Like we created an account, right? And then we created one contact. And in that particular contact, what we did is we used the ID what we got as a response from contact creation and sub request one, right? Next one is you might ask, okay, we are all good with slides and demo, but when to use what, right? I made a point here. I have written this that most ideal to use this batch is most ideal to use when there are unrelated calls. That is no relation between sub request. If you want any relations dependencies, then go with the tree and composite request. If you have strictly parent-child relationship, then go with the tree. If we have just lookup relationship, even the parent-child relationship, or any kind of lookups or anything, you can go with the composite request. Here in batch, you have to go with the if you have to go with a batch, then make sure that it doesn't have any dependency, right? So it is most idiomatic to use there. For example, just you're creating a contact or account, right? Or just querying some records from account or contact which doesn't have any dependency on each other. When to use tree? Like most ideal to use when there is a parent-child hierarchy or nested child parent-child hierarchy, right? For example, like we saw, we could create account contact, we could create order line item, we could create opportunity line item, and so wherever we see there is a parent-child relationship. And for composite request, the most ideal to use when response from one request is used for another request, right? Like we saw in demo, we created one parent first, right? So let's not talk about the parent. We created an account, right? Just forget about the parent here. We created an account and we use that particular ID of the response to create another contact. And we could have created one parent account and just on a simple account, right? So can we say this composite request can be used instead of tree or batch, right? Yeah, absolutely. Because this composite request can be used to create your parent-child relationships as well. It could be used independently as well. So I say this is superset, and these are like just a subset of composite request logically, right? So in batch, we cannot create more than 25 sub requests, 25 records in a single call. Same goes with the composite request itself. It cannot have more than 25 sub requests. But for tree, you can have more than 25 sub requests. You can create up to 200 records. Only limitation is you cannot go beyond 5 levels of relationships, right? We saw about this as well. And for the error attributes, on the batch we have halt and error, which is by default as false. On tree we have no attribute for error because it's a child parent child relationship, right? If you're not able to create one child, then just roll back, right? I do not want the parent as well. And for composite request, error attribute is all or none is by default true. You have to make it explicitly false, then you have to write it, you have to mention it. I have put 2 points as notes here, if you see. First one says, do not confuse or use composite resources or API instead of any other kind of API which is already built for its most idiomatic usage. For example, all these composite resources are using REST APIs, which are synchronous, right? And even say, like we saw about in batch, it happens sequentially, synchronous or trace and composite request as well. All are using REST, right? So you cannot use it instead of using a say bulk API because bulk API will be asynchronous and it will have some other API limits. So all these composite resources API are only made to reduce the number of APIs limits that we make while integration, right? So you don't have to use this batch is very different from our usual batch processing that we do and we define in sales software. So that batch is just it will be in parallel, asynchronous, and everything. This batch is not parallel. This is synchronous, not even asynchronous. The next one is it says composite request can mimic the operation of batch, both batch entry, right? We just saw about it. A composite request can be used to create parent-child relationships, and it could be used to have independent, non-related request, sub-request as well, right? So this completes this particular slide and your presentation as well. So I hope this was useful for all of you. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me or you can reach out to Shravan, who is the organizer of this particular meetup, and he has done a wonderful job. So if you want to reach out to me or him, just reach out to us on LinkedIn or shoot out an email to us, and we'll be happy to help you all. Thank you so much. Have a great day.